Hey, good
Good morning.
morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning. Happy first Tuesday of the month of February. So for wherever you are,
Already.
yeah, over in Colin's part of the world, you are probably digging out from an insane amount.
Yes, we are.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, if you're
Winter
just joining us,
Wonderland.
the Wonderland, that's what we'll call it. We'll call it a winter wonderland.
Wonderland.
So welcome to the show. If you're just joining us, today is a part of our Teamwork Tuesday conversations. And today we're going to be talking about what happens in almost the juxtaposition between community versus individualism. But before we get into that, I have a really exciting invitation and announcement that we would love for you to know. On February 29th, you're going to be seeing some information come out shortly. We're going to be doing our first live workshop, and it is going to be about how to lead like a coach 101. So we're going to be talking about how we can reimagine dialogue at work. So we're going to do some teaching about helping you build those skills. And there's actually going to be some practical applications right there live in the workshop. You can follow us. We're going to be making the announcements shortly about it. And we look forward to it. And we hope to see you there. So Carol and Colin, today we're going to be talking about community in the workplace, but not just about the nice side of community, but actually helping us to understand what it looks like to build it and what it also looks like when we don't have a strong sense of it. So there are things that can help us define a community. And I think that it would be great for us to start our conversation there today about what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think there's some key elements to it, right? And I'm sure there's lots more, but the first one would be a collaborative environment,
Okay.
an environment that's engaged, one where morale and job satisfaction are more elevated than baselines, and then one where there's a real feeling of resilience within the team, and also inclusion, so that together we are stronger as a group. And of course, the antithesis of those are manifested in kind of the opposite, right? Where you have more competition, you have less cooperation amongst individuals, and that really can show up and break down productivity and efficiencies. So this isn't just a personal matter that we're talking about. It really can have a huge impact on things like missed opportunities. So that's company wide, and then individual on the individual side, it of course can manifest in depression and anxiety and all of those other markers that are counterproductive, and then we go on to loneliness and isolation and things like that. So important subject matter, especially post 2020, right, when everything changed, right, Carol?
Yeah. And I think there was something that existed before COVID that we took for granted. And but like teams, it isn't naturally occurring. It isn't something that just happens when you put a group of people together. So a community that may have been existing fully expressed in a workplace prior to COVID got all broken up and split up because we weren't in the same workplace. We were working hybrid, or we were working remote. And then there's this enforced return to work that has happened. And as a result of that, I think people have forgotten or maybe never had the experience of what it is like to work in a community setting in a workplace, because it doesn't happen without some forethought and some effort and work put into it. Colin, you and I met in a workplace that has stood out for me as being absolutely remarkable. Playground, which was a division of IntraWest, was one of the most amazing places that I have ever worked. And the motto that we all held, and I think we took it very as seriously as we could, was we work to play.
That's right.
And it was emulated throughout the organization. And you opened the elevators at HQ, at head office, there was a hopscotch painted
Yeah.
on the concrete to walk in.
So fun.
And there were puzzles and things all over the walls, and it was clearly intended to be a place where people had fun. But more than that, what happened was these incredible relationships were built in a relatively short period of time.
Mhm.
I worked there for about 5 years, and the connections that I made were just they're still deep in my heart and really connected with people around the world.
Mhm.
What do
It's
you think,
interesting.
Colin?
It's
Yeah.
interesting that what came out of that culture, though, were a whole lot of exceptional coaches, which is interesting that I hadn't thought
Oh,
about
that's
that until just
interesting.
now.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that culture was based on play, right? But
Mhm.
also based on sort of shared spaces and allowing creativity. And there was that sort of the rule in brainstorming, right? That you can say anything and there's no judgment, and this is a place of
Yeah.
creativity and expansion, and we're creating stages upon which people live their lives and create memories and legacy. So we the ambition was lofty, right? Because you're placemaking and things like that.
Mhm.
But it was just this completely egoless, creative, almost like a not like a think tank, but those places, those capsules that they put people in just to go crazy with wild ideas, and we did that every
Mm.
day.
Yeah, we
Um,
did. We had that
and
opportunity.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
I forgot how many coaches came out of that environment. So what does that say, right? What is that
Yeah.
saying about um, the idea of we work to play, right?
Well, there was a
Yeah.
real invitation for that kind of collaboration, and what happened out of it was people felt like they could be fully expressed. So there was that wonderful alignment of purpose, which was we worked hard. No,
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
wasn't all play, that was for sure. There were many, many long hours and many events and things that we attended and worked on that took us deep into the night. But there was the shared fun experience too. And there was this sense of being able to lean on each other. In whenever there was a big event that occurred, everybody came in and helped. And that's where I think of that raising a barn idea that
Yeah.
happens in community, in rural places like you grew up, Christal.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually thinking about that. One of the interesting things that you said, Colin, about how what community provides is and what it provides for the organization, but for the people inside that. One of the words you used was resilience. And I don't
Mhm.
think that that's a word that inclusion, that seems very obvious. Engagement seems very obvious. Resilience is actually, I can see it. It just is not as much of an obvious thing. But if we think about the ways that helping to build resilience in our teams, what that provides for the individuals and for the team. If we think about setbacks, and I think about, so in terms of community, Carol, referring to that, I think about my parents. I'm from a central Saskatchewan, and my parents live in a very tiny town. We joke that it would be like 500 people if you counted the dogs twice, right? Everybody and the dogs twice. But there is such a strong sense of resilience in that town because people have each other's backs. And if something
Mm.
happens, you know that other people surround you, everything from loss to all the things that we know are going to call upon resilience.
Mhm.
And as leaders and as team builders and people who lead teams or maybe are part of teams, I think it's really an important attribute to community that is perhaps not so often given enough
Yeah.
airplay to talk about what that provides for people, because the opposite of that is the individualism, which leads to isolation. And Colin, you talked about this already. And
Right.
isolation leads to becoming very non-resilient, very brittle in your thinking, very unbending in how you see things.
Mhm. One of the things when we were talking about this episode yesterday, Christal, that you said that I think defines community is that it is an actual connection.
Yeah.
So it is when people feel like they've got that ability to go to someone or some group of people, and they are connected in a way where they're accepted.
Mhm.
And they know that whether it's a good time or a bad time, they're going to have
Yeah.
somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And there is that sense of camaraderie that allows you to know, oh, this was a tough day, but you know what? I got my team together with me tomorrow. It's going to get
Yeah.
better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
Exactly.
It
Mm.
gets back to that conversation we had also about the perfect cocktail, right? So it's also on the leader to know the ingredients that he's putting into that community,
mhm.
Mhm.
and to be attentive to people that might have an issue with boundary setting, or there might be social anxiety there
Yeah.
as well. So that just for the leader to be aware of the cocktail that they're making. It's live and it's organic and it's human. And
Yes.
we spoke last time about, you know, being attentive to how people can't leave their personal lives at the door anymore. You know, it's no longer widgets, building
Yeah.
widgets.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's human beings in
Yeah.
this room.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, the interesting part about that is that in some of what I have read, and certainly the people I've talked to, sometimes widget building builds the best communities because they know we're all here building the widget together, and we better be a community, otherwise it's going to drive us crazy. So
Yeah.
there's some interesting camaraderie and
Mhm.
collaboration that happens in those communities. But it is about, when we talk about it, what defines it? Well, we know kind of what defines it and what the outcomes could be, but how do you create it?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
as you said, Colin, if you're a leader looking around
Mhm.
thinking, well, I want to build community, doesn't everybody? What is it? So what are those factors that take it from being just a workplace to being a community of people in a workplace?
I think you have to start with that concept of a shared microvision or a shared vision
Mhm.
for that workplace. You know, we often work with organizations that have incredible strategic plans and beautiful visions and missions, but may f- you some good work to be done would be to look at what is the cohesive mission and vision and values and the attributes, the tone of voice, even the language, like even like a small brand promise for that individual team that
Sure.
everybody can get around. Um,
Mhm.
because yeah, it's about creating a shared common vision for that group. You know,
It
Mhm.
facilitates
for your
alignment, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people feel like they're attending something that's important to them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
And the other piece that in the reading that I've done and in the teams that I've been working with, it's also remembering that we need to have those elements of play. There needs to be a social
Mm,
connection.
Mhm.
So is it a potluck at lunch? Is it an
Yeah.
opportunity to go out together? Because while playground, we said we work to play, we lived our words. We actually had organized social events
Mhm.
where everybody
yeah,
was invited to engage. And
Mhm.
that
yeah.
was the team building part that had us feel like we were a community, was the
Yeah.
fun that we had together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we also knew that we were creating spaces for fun for others too. So that was like also a collective mission. So we would have fun
Mhm.
together, but we were also creating fun. So our goal was yeah, it was a double whammy on that play.
Mhm.
And but that's a really good point, Carol. A lot of people forget about play, you know, in the and humor, and
Yeah.
you know, it's time for
Yeah.
some fun again. And
Yeah.
we all got so serious.
Mhm.
And a
Mhm.
sense of lightness in some
Yeah.
way, right? Like finding things. And it's amazing because humor, like a smile is like the universal, it is the universal thing that we would do even if we didn't speak the same language or
Mhm.
anything. There's that is a smile and humor is there. I think the third thing is about communication.
Oh,
And
yeah.
because there is an intentionality in what we're talking about around communities. So, and not a heavy handed, which is boundaries are important, but communication around how we communicate with people in a way that they feel heard, that
Mhm.
validates them, that they feel like it's a safe space, but it's also an accountable space so that they can have the freedom to be able to show up and embrace it,
Mhm.
so when people are put into what's often kind of, the kind of the stereotypical like team building exercises. And I think of things like from the early 2000s, the show The Office and all the crazy things that Michael Scott tried to get them to do, right? Like well-intended sometimes, but misled a little bit. But when we're forced into things
Mhm.
without either clear understandings or anything, if the communication is not clear, then it pulls us back into a place of feeling isolated again. And we can be in the middle of a team and be in the middle of all these great things going on, and we can
Mhm.
still feel like we're not welcome to be a part of it. And
It's
I
so
think
true.
that's the interesting thing that comes back around to us as leaders and to the people that are listening or finding this conversation is, do you have even do you understand how to draw people into community as well?
Mm. Mm.
Do we understand how to be able to set things,
Mhm.
if perhaps in a setting, there's a lot we're learning a lot around how different generations are seeing
Yeah.
the workplace, how
Mhm.
things can be interpreted differently. What is your skill set that you're building to be able to reach people in where they're at as a leader and to help draw them into that stronger sense of community?
Well, it's such a good definition because what if leaders weren't considered, I don't know, executives? What if they were considered community builders?
Yeah.
How much differently would they approach what they do when they're interacting with their people? If your mandate as a leader was not to just the bottom line of how much more profit, but what are the attributes of the community in your division?
And
And that work
you can measure it differently too, right? Like
can.
Riley was speaking about measuring things like well-being and wellness and happiness and
Yeah.
more,
Mhm.
indicators around um, yeah, loyalty and all these other things that
Mhm.
could paint a very different picture than an ROI number, and I
Mhm.
think that's where we need to go,
Oh,
right?
yes. And it leads beautifully into further conversations because that is in a multi-generational workplace, which most of them are now. We're dealing with people's motivations are different. Their
Yep,
sense of loyalty is completely
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
What has them want to go to work in the morning is going to be
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
as a leader, when we look at our team building, it's going to be a challenge to
Yeah.
invite everyone to play,
Mhm. Mhm.
not just those
and
who
it
put their hands up first.
the
Yeah.
organization is also and the teams and people are working on a quicksand environment from a macroeconomic perspective,
Mhm.
right? Like the world
Yes.
around outside those office doors is also changing and morphing, and values and everything has changed. So leaders today need to really work on what we call the leadership toolkit, and having that firm sort of tripod of resilience, if you want, is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
We work with and work through with people, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Because it's
Mhm.
scary out there.
Yeah.
Not right. So
Yeah.
creation of community also has to come from a sense of confidence too, right? That you as a leader are confident and resilient and sound, and you have a solid foundation to come in and
Mhm.
build that community. Because if you're bringing in fear from the outside, or you're bringing in ego, or all sorts of external elements, that can be a real challenge.
Mhm.
Oh, it
Yeah.
definitely
It's
can.
like,
Yeah.
don't have energy for it, right?
Right.
So
It
Yeah.
leads perfectly to what we want to do at the end of the month, Crystal, with the
Mhm.
idea of creating the workshop. What as we're describing it, to really be providing leaders with a tool that they
Yeah.
can be using immediately. So in the workshop, there's definitely going to be that opportunity to work on and practice something that you can put into practice the very next day.
Yeah. And it's very put into practice very next day, and the ability to be able to create create cohesion, cultural cohesion, and community with your team. Those are transferable skills in terms of your career. Even I think about, and I know we're wrapping up here, but I think about one of the clients recently that I had, and he moved on from the organization that we started our coaching in. He moved on, but one of the transferable skills that he talked about was what he learned about how to lead a team that helped him get his next job, and actually resulted in him moving to a different part of the country as well. But that's helping to future-proof our businesses and ourselves, because that is, the future is in connection, right? Like in a world that is so much in the world is trying to tell us that everything is being lost, and we're going to become, we're fighting against becoming further and further disconnected. The future is in connection. And it's in how we allow ourselves to embrace it, and how we stay open to becoming those kind of leaders. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks for
Thank you.
showing up today. And to you, the listener, wherever this conversation finds you, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can like and subscribe. If you don't already follow us on LinkedIn, oh look, there's the
There it is.
Flash
Flash it.
flash micro learning right there.
Subliminal message, like
Yes.
us on LinkedIn.
Click here.
You can find us on all those channels. And if you have a conversation or a topic that you would like to have us cover, please do not hesitate to reach out. And that leads us to one last question. Carol, why don't you ask that last question before we sign off?
We would love to know, what was the best community you ever had at work, and why? Let's start a conversation.
Let's start there. You
Leave
can
in the
comment.
comments.
Yeah, in the comments, wherever you've found this conversation, please let us know, and we would love to share that experience. And we will give a shout out to you, we promise. All right, until we see you again, thanks for joining us, and have a great week ahead. Thanks.
Take good care.
Bye.